Welcome to another show, the Research to Reps Roundtable. I get to see my friends again here, co-host Dr. Ernie Rimer and Dr. Ted Lambrinidis, and we got a special guest today. But before we get to that guest, I'm going to go ahead and check in with Ted. Ted, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Pat. It's good to be on the program with three Cardinals today. Looking forward to
Let's
it.
go. Let's go, Dr.
Right on.
Rimer. What's happening?
Uh, I'm doing great today, and I'm really excited to be on the call. I feel like we kind of go back a little bit with Brett Hayes, but I don't think it would do it justice if I introduced them. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Pat, because I know you and him go way back.
We go way back like Cadillac seats, and Ted knows a little bit about that. Well, Brett Hayes, it is great to have you here on the podcast. This is the first time on Research to Reps. You've been on Beyond Sets and Reps, but this time we're going to get a little nerdy. And I know you
Uh,
can do that because you got on your nerd glasses. And I'm not trying to call anyone out. I wear glasses as well. It's part of what we do. But
Yeah, nerd glasses. This is age glasses. I can't see y'all without these. So
I,
I've lost my nerd ability. It's more about visuals at this point.
I was
well,
just going to say, I mean, they're not dark rim, so
Yeah, I
it's
do need to get my Pat Kelsey on. I think I might, when I upgrade, I'll get a nice pair of black rims.
well, dark. Well,
Right, right,
well,
right.
let me tell people a little bit about you. You're a physical therapist by trade. You're a West Coaster from the state of Oregon. I see you throwing up the dubs, West Side. And I think it's important that they know you have a background and you're passionate about sports. So just because you're a physical therapist doesn't mean that you work with sports or you are passionate about sports. I found you to be someone that is passionate about sports, athletes, coaches, holistic training, development. And when I first had a chance to meet you back when I was at the University of Missouri and as the head strength and conditioning coach, we were introduced by a mutual friend, and we can talk all about our mutual friends because that's how we got to know each other. And you came
Right.
over and told you about what we were doing in the weight room and thought maybe you could help us out. We had a good strength and conditioning coach, Dr. Andrew Paul, who was
Yeah.
uh, who is now with the Oklahoma City Thunder, had just
Mhm.
left Missouri to go on to take on that role there, and he's dominating. And we had a void on staff, and
Yeah.
boy, did you fill the void. You must have been a linebacker or a fullback back in the day because you ran downhill, stuck your head in there, filled the hole, blew up the scene, and
Yeah.
and then we were just counting how many what the aftermath was. So with that, I don't know if you can beat that intro, but
No, you filled it in. I was gonna just have you keep going. You're nailing it. Yeah, no. It's funny what you were doing, and I don't know what it was, Pat. It was like we clicked just in what we had from a vision standpoint. We continue to this day. I think that's why we're still together. I mean, my God, I followed you here for crying out loud. This is where I had to be because that's where Pat was going. And I don't know if the vision works without each other. But yeah, when I got in there, I that was my first transplant away from the Northwest. I didn't know what the heck was going on in Missouri. That was a weird place for me. Heck, when you're like raised in the Pac-12, which was the Pac-10 back then, you don't even know what's going on out here. You talk about an East Coast bias. We had a West Coast bias. We were just kind of like, Missouri, are they even Division One? I didn't even know. And then all of a sudden it clicked. And then when I got there, I had the opportunity to bring some of what I had learned clinically from my years with the Seahawks back, God, it was like 98 to 06 when I was there and trying to develop things that were very rehab specific, but that's when we came up with corrective biomechanics, because we understood it from what athletes needed in the pros. They were just reaching out to us because they wanted to continue their therapy even after their rehab was cleared. We were onto something. And I think that's what we had to bring together when we got together at Missouri. And there it is.
I'll lead into that. My question, Brett, when we were at the NFL Combine last year,
Right.
a little bit, discuss with some of our listeners how you have integrated, a lot of times people talk about, markerless motion capture.
Right.
What's the practical application of that within the settings that you are utilizing there at the University of Louisville?
I'm glad you led into that, Ted. That was a pretty cool session we had together up there. And, I've been working with markerless motion capture for some time. In fact, we beta tested the whole system, which was the DARI motion capture system back at Mizzou. And as time went on, realized that for all the capture systems that are out there, there wasn't a lot of integration. We were just taking pictures and getting data, and we weren't doing much with it. And what really plugged into me as a physical therapist is I realized, man, we needed a tool that could actually help us predict, bad word, but I'm going to use it, predict the potential for injury in athletes. We knew there was a value there. And so once we kind of got it developed and I was able to bring it here to Louisville, I needed a conduit to help with that. Fortunately, that conduit's sitting here on this podcast as well, Ernie Rimer. Realized that, hey, we got to capture this and we can use this to mitigate injuries here. I'm like, you're kidding. Let's see what we do. And so together we created this, for lack of a better term, protocol where we baseline our athletes and we look not for their performance metrics as much as we look for their joint vulnerability metrics that DARI is really good at flushing out. And even though as clinicians, we're good at seeing that stuff, Ted, with our eyes, I knew we needed something technological that could really put us on the same page. I mean, I think everybody on this call can realize you put an athlete in a room with 10 guys like me, 10 physical therapists, you're going to get 10 different responses. We're going to spend so much time arguing about what we think is right that the athlete's just sitting there not getting what they need. I like having something that can put us all on the same page from a visual standpoint. We can say, all right, do we agree with what the DARI just showed us? Yes. All right, let's get an intervention to see if we can't mitigate this. So we've been successful with that here, Ted. We've got, we started with our women's basketball program, mostly because that was the easiest conduit. We were asked to work with men's basketball, but once we got in there, we had a coaching change here at Louisville. The consistency we knew we were going to get rested with women's hoops, and we baselined all the athletes. We looked at interventions that we knew could lead to injury, or at the very least we speculated. And through the interventions, when Ernie's team brought us what the injury rates were, we chopped away at them because we knew what the injuries were. And then all of a sudden, wow, look at this, over a 3-season span, we reduced injuries 5-fold. So we knew we were onto it. And so we had already kind of done some of that when you and I met up there, Ted, at the Combine. And I'll ask you this, because I thought it was interesting when I went up there and we were talking to, the guys from the Colts and people that were around, and they're like, yeah, we just can't really get our athletes interested in getting scanned in this thing, because there was like a fear of that. And I don't know, Ted, I mean, they told me some things, but what is your thought of that? I mean, you're such an NFL journeyman. What do you see as the barrier to implementing that kind of technology in the pros?
I think it's how it's messaged. And if the athlete views that you're going to take the data and say, listen, this guy's just as good as player B, but his screening shows that he may be more vulnerable in an injury, that could be not, potentially can mean the difference between on the roster and being cut. So I understand it from a player's perspective.
Right.
But according to the CBA, a lot of that data is not supposed to be shared with management. It's only supposed to be within the sports medicine and performance staffs.
Mm-hmm. Do they trust that? I've always
No,
wondered if they did. Yeah, they
I
don't.
don't think.
Yeah, I don't trust it. No, and I get it. It's a contract. You bet. And I did notice there were a couple of players up there. Well, not players. I mean, players in the community. There was a local club, I would say, an athletic performance center that had a DARI, and they said actually a lot of those athletes come to us because they know the data. They see the value, in finding out what their vulnerabilities are to address. But they found that I'll just go outside the system to get that done by an independent party, which I thought was fascinating and understandable.
Right.
So yeah, that was pretty interesting.
And I think sometimes the intervention strategies sometimes aren't explained to them as much. That
Right.
technically this is a tool that will help you with your career longevity if utilized properly.
I'm glad you brought that up. I get the opportunity with a lot of our student athletes just to be a mentor, really in education. But I can't help but ask them questions about their care. And one of our athletes, and I know she won't mind me saying her name, Chelsea Mack, she's a fielder for us in the softball team and a great slapper. I was asking her questions about really the DARI, but I was also asking really just about her performance intervention. She said, if I don't know why I'm doing something, I'm not bought into doing it. And I wouldn't say taken aback. I get it. But as a old school guy, right? You do what you're told, right? Gen Xers, man, you got a coach telling you what to do. You just got out there and do it. Now you got athletes that are questioning the why. I don't blame them. You don't have a lot of time to waste. And maybe that just carries more up to the next level when you start looking at, well, what's the training? What's this going to do for me? If I'm going to put all this effort and time into it, tell me how I'm getting better. So I like that, Ted. I think we do need to educate our athletes what we're doing and why.
Yeah, if you look at some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, a lot of them utilize the services of the one group where Chris Hess does a lot of the motion capture with the quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks have figured out the value of making sure from a performance standpoint that they have the most efficient biomechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking the same approach, only it's for basic movement patterns.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nah.
Brett, I can tell you in my experience on a few NFL teams that if something like, and this was a few years ago, but not in some programs, not in some organizations, not much has changed. If you had come in, someone like you and Ernie had come in and said, hey, we're going to DARI test you, I would have asked you questions. You would have told me why. And I wouldn't have believed anything. I would have believed you, but I wouldn't have believed in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because those organizations don't have the infrastructure to carry out what you say should be the processes for injury mitigation. Like, I don't trust, like, okay, I'm going to get in this machine. I'm going to produce some numbers. The sports scientist is going to collect that data. He's going to give it to the PT who's doing corrective biomechanics. We don't have those people in the building working together for me to even believe that we're going to be able to do something positive with this information. Okay, you found I've got some asymmetry. Okay, you found that I've got some joint torque issues. Okay, you found that my core is not firing. I don't believe that information you have is going to get to the professionals working in my building, and then I'm going to receive an individualized program that you're going to be able to track. I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Because those people aren't in a lot of buildings. And Ted, you've been in a lot of buildings. I'm not trying to put you in a bad position here, but I think you can agree with what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I can't disagree because I've seen it myself. And it's not just at the pro level. You see it at the collegiate level. But I think that's the magic, honestly, Pat, when you tell about our stories. And, we had this philosophy at Missouri, but let's face it, we couldn't implement it. We didn't have the titles to push it. And it's one thing to come to a place and say, all right, now we got the titles. But that doesn't mean you just get buy-in for this whole team, or what we have coined as that comprehensive integration approach, where you work with your athletic trainers, your dietitians, your strength and conditioning team. People have got to not just be bought in, but they have to be educated, and honestly, just, man, part of one. That's the thing I think we deal with so much. We had magic, when we did it together, Pat, because I needed strength coaches to carry out corrective biomechanics. You can't just sit there and go, all right, I'm going to throw these little correctives at you. We tried, but I knew that, man, when that rubber hit the road out in the weight room or down in the field house, if we didn't have strength coaches that understood what I was looking at and were trying to find it on the field, they couldn't come back to me during the sessions I had on the table and say, hey, Brett, I was watching him do X, Y, and Z, and man, something ain't right. And I was coaching him up really good. And we had such a great relationship developed that way. And I think that inspired us, honestly, Pat, to be able to understand how we had to integrate it here. And I believe we're still working on it. Man, Ernie bought in. That was the coolest thing. He understood what we were trying to do, and he knew how to deliver the data. I think that's the sexy part of it, man, because once he started putting numbers out that we could wrap our heads around to the people we worked with, we all became accountable to it. And that's the thing that data did for me. And it was the revelation that Ernie brought to the game, because I saw that and it's like, man, I'm not the only one seeing this, and I ain't the one creating it either. I'm not telling you what these athletes have wrong. The data is showing you. And so maybe that's the secret sauce of this discussion right there, Pat, is that, as an athlete, if you don't see that this is going to be implemented down the chain, why would you get bought in? But like, I'll give you a great example of women's basketball. Ren, who's our head strength coach there, he is so engaged, man. He wanted to know what was going on. And more importantly, he wanted us in that weight room. He wanted us in there watching these athletes move and really communicating to him. It's one thing when the DARI shows you something, but if you're communicating to him how that is reflected into performance, then he's like, oh, yeah, well, what if I added this exercise and this into the routine? I'm like, brilliant. That's the magic. And right there, Pat, that's the demonstration, I think. And had you seen that, would you have bought in? I think is my question back to you. And are we, frankly, on the precipice of greatness? If we can keep spreading this message out to people to understand what it means to work together, I mean, could we get there?
I think so. I think so. When I look at what Ernie's done with sports science, because the basis of everything we do in all of these different health and performance verticals, the foundation of it is science.
Mm-hmm.
We're all here doing sport, but it is the foundation. And so if you can finally start to see sports science as something more than just gadgets and technology, then you can start to see, okay, when we're talking to our sports medicine people and our team physicians, if we can help them to understand, because here's the one thing I've heard this time and time again, Ted, you can back me up with this. We need to have the same language. The same is science.
Mm-hmm.
It is science. What are we talking about? Well, we need to have the same terminology. This group over here says this, and this group says, it doesn't matter. Science is science. And if we can just, but the problem is what have we defined science as? Ernie, what have we defined science as? So that when we're doing this markerless biomechanical analysis, and we're gathering this data, and we're then wanting to share this data. Like, what's your answer to that?
To defining science?
Well, I'm glad I didn't get that question.
Are you wanting a definition of science or sports science?
You know, I think in the context we're talking about, it is definitely sports science. And why is it that we hide behind these boundaries in these silos without crossing over and understanding sports science and how it can bridge this conversation? Because I believe if the athletes truly believe that we were all talking on their behalf, working for their behalf, and then educating them, the buy-in would be through the roof. We would have more buy-in than we can supply. But I believe sports science is the key to that. So what is happening that is preventing others from implementing it? And then and the challenges you've had implementing sports science with people and trying to educate people on what it is from your perspective.
Well, from my standpoint, I mean, I'm going to break a record here, and it's not fancy at all, but sports science is simply the study of sport. And you know, our context right now is health and performance. So we're using science, which is a process toward acquiring new knowledge, and we're applying that to problems and challenges we face in health and performance in sport. And it's really fascinating because, you know, when I look at the nature of things, all of us have passed a big science test to get our degrees and our licenses. We have to pass a big science test and answer all these questions. Though the answers to those questions, to those answers, are based off of scientific research for our field. And now we're applying that to sport. So in a lot of ways, sports science is truly all encompassing. What ends up happening though is that we go and we start to work and we start to act as clinicians or practitioners in our given disciplines, and we take what has been learned and we gain from doing the hands-on work. But we leave behind the process that led us to our knowledge in the first place, which is the process of inquiry, using the data, the evidence and the data you're collecting on a regular basis, evaluating that, putting it into practice, making decisions, evaluating the decisions and the outcomes. And all that kind of is just science right there. And it's a ton of fun because sometimes, and obviously I don't say this out loud, but I'll say it out loud on a podcast, but so many people will cringe when they hear science or research. And I don't want my athletes to participate in research. And I start to think, like, when was the last time you've had a winning season? Maybe some research might help you get over that hump. Oh, well, it's recruiting. It's not how we manage or coach our athletes. It's recruiting. Okay, cool. Well, when was the last time you actually did some research on your recruiting methods? Because clearly the athletes who are coming in aren't winning. Right? So that's a negative aspect. But on the other end, I don't want to take up my athletes' time to do research. And you know, we are a successful program. We're there. Okay, cool. Well, what's the next step though? Well, we want to make the Sweet 16. We've never made the Sweet 16. We make it to the playoffs, but we can't make the Sweet 16. Okay, well, what's the barrier? Right? Why can't you get over that hump? Oh, well, you know, we just got to stick with the process. Right, but the process you're doing is just good enough to fall short of the Sweet 16. Maybe some scientific research might get us past that barrier and get us into the Sweet 16 and beyond. Right. So sometimes I think, like, it's really important to frame where we are in our process. If you distill it down to the practitioner level, where are you succeeding? Like, what's going really well? I can get my athletes really, really strong. Great. Why? Why are they getting strong? Like what is really working? Like let's research that. So we never let it go with the next shiny object. So we keep that going. We won a national championship. Why? Why did we win that national championship? Let's study that. Let's research that. So we're not a one-hit wonder. Right? So that's why for me, sports science is so exciting because it can answer all those questions. It can answer why are we successful? Why are we unsuccessful? Why is a certain clinical practice successful? Now, with regards to like corrective biomechanics, right? Let's bring it back down to that. I would love to discuss why it might be successful and what some of the outcomes are. I mean, for me, Brett, you said that Ernie bought in, but it was easy to buy in because, in the early 2000s, I was introduced to the functional movement screen. And so we did this screen with athletes, and it was a subjective screen. And I'm a scientist now. In the olden days, I was doing a subjective screen, right? But scientists prefer more objective data collection. So you can see where we're going with this, with markerless motion capture. But then we would do these corrective movements. And really the gold standard, which you all figured out at Mizzou, but would be to get those athletes with those movement limitations to work directly with a physical therapist or some other person who can do some additional manual therapy and put the athlete in the right position. And then fast forward to my days at the ski team, we had an athlete there, and with all of our house, our athletic trainers, our physical therapists, we couldn't solve some chronic issues she was having with her knee and with her back. And the only people I knew to call were Gray Cook and Lee Burton. So we invested the money to fly her out to spend some time in Virginia with them because they were going to put her on the table and they were going to do work. And then they sent her back with the manual therapy routines they were doing and the recommendations. We were able to get her over the hump with her chronic pain, and then she won some podiums in the World Cup. Right.
There you go.
So then we come here and we have markerless motion capture, and so now we get to put more targeted information on more objective information on what might be happening in an athlete's body. And so I'm going to give a little case example here. I wrote this down. The most fascinating, interesting case for me was an athlete had an ankle injury. So there's the ankle injury.
Yeah, there you go. That's a pretty good illustration there, Dr. Rimer.
And then this athlete is doing a squat. They're in a squat position. And what we observed from the markerless motion capture is that they didn't have as much knee flexion or hip flexion on that side. But this athlete's experienced some SI pain. What the markerless motion capture picked up was that there was greater abduction on the side that flexed more, but because of that ankle locking up that leg, and that leg wouldn't flex as much, there's greater adduction, which now tweaks the spine and potentiates some SI dysfunction. So this is like something you can't pick up from a subjective movement screen, but you can with markerless motion capture. So I'll just drop that now. And I want Brett to define corrective biomechanics. What's the definition?
The simple definition is using manual, therapeutic, and exercise-based interventions to enhance and improve athletic performance. Notice I didn't say rehabilitate, treat pain, take care of an injury. That's not the case, which is a real hard sell out in my world these days because healthcare isn't healthcare, it's sick care. And so when you're taking care of people, you're being reactive. You're treating something that happened, and insurance tends to pay for that. Now, when you tell them, yeah, well, that injury might not have happened in the first place if I would have used my therapeutic interventions based upon a joint vulnerability to avoid that injury before it even happened. Insurance goes, sounds great, but we're not paying for that. And it never makes sense. There's nothing we're doing in healthcare that really does the prevention or proactive based model. And so corrective biomechanics, honestly, is a service that's designed just for that. It's to be that proactive model. And I really believe, like what you've asked me to define, is not only a service of the future, but it could redefine healthcare if these entities in our world see what we're doing, see what we're, you can forget, the stuff we care about, like keeping them out there on the court, the field, yada, yada, and reducing the injury rates. But if an insurance company could actually see that, hey, they could save money in that, just by giving that ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure, then boom, there we go. But I start to digress. That's something I really just go crazy about in today's world, especially the way healthcare is getting attacked. But I'd like to take this discussion a little bit back to what Ted said, and honestly, what you were doing, Ernie. You guys started talking about that common language, So I'm taking off my clinician's hat and putting my administrator's hat on, because I find that when you're trying to lead this group or integrate this group, it's not just the common language that's important, it's how you convey the language. Ernie, when you were talking about using even the word research to a coach, and all love to coaches, coaches see the lab, right, and the bubbles and the Frankenstein's monster development, and that we're testing on their athletes. It's not what we're saying. We're saying we want to measure things that actually might help us keep your athletes in the game and help them perform better. But they see research as a different term. Now, elevate it to what I learned in the biomechanics world, to what you learn in the sports science world, and to what the strength conditioning coaches learn in their world. You start spouting off your terminology. I have learned, working with people, that it's really easy to get an ego ruffled, or to get somebody defensive if they don't feel they have the vocabulary. One of my favorite examples is a great story. One of our greatest mutual friends, Brian Mann, down at Texas A&M, when we had him at Missouri, I get a kick out of B-Man, because when he talks, man, you can tell he's from this, back country in Oklahoma that he loves to talk about. But what's so funny is, in between the F-bombs, guy brings in some polysyllabic words that just go out in left field. And we were doing this presentation with one of our smartest physical therapists at Mizzou when B-Man was there. And I swear, B-Man asked a question to this guy. And keep in mind, the guy that I wish I could remember his name. I'd like to give him props for it. But he was talking way above all our heads. But B-Man asked him a question, and I swear he used the word aloquacious, which I don't even know what that means. But he used it. Is that data aloquacious? I'm just making up a word, because it was like that. And the smartest guy I'd ever worked with, this guy was frozen. Didn't know how to answer the question. Just sat there. And I started laughing out loud, and I go, B-Man, he doesn't know what that means. None of us know what that means, and I could put levity to it. And it was just hilarious, because he rephrased it and he did awesome. But if those kinds of words are used in company where some people don't know it, it actually raises up defensive walls in your ego. This is just straight up psychology. And I think that is sometimes the biggest barrier to us working closer and closer together. You see all these people that have done so well to get to where they are individually, and they're proud of themselves and what they know. And if you make them feel like they don't know something in any way, shape, or form, even if it's unintentional, you're going to put your own wall up. That's just straight up psychology. And so I think we've learned really well, at least I have, because, Pat, you and I dealt with this in ways, we won't even talk about at Missouri. I never dumb anything down, but I also try to use less threatening language. Sounds silly, but things that just bring people along into my world, as opposed to using terminology from my world that just might not compute to them. Because you can see it in someone's eyes when you've triggered that ego spark that says, this guy's too smart. I'm not going to work with him. He's going to make me look bad. He's going to take my job. He's going to do this. And so When Ted says we got to find a common language, I 100% agree. But what is that common language? You know, how do we all get together in one space and just make sure that we're on the same page? And you know, Ernie, I'll throw that back to you a little bit because you remind me of B Man because you got the words, you know, and you bring them out there. But how do we, you know, get into that space and be sensitive to those things to actually help us draw it forward? I think we've gotten good at that here at Louisville, but um, what do you see, or do you see a barrier there? Maybe I'm just speaking in the weird space.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've heard it from both sides. Like during my PhD, my faculty chair, Jim Martin, um, he has a different opinion on this because we've talked about presenting and teaching to a room in the academic setting, and in our conversations in the lab, we spent a lot of time in the lab during those PhD years. And his philosophy was, you're not there to talk to everyone in the room. You're there to talk to the three people who actually understand what you're talking about. So that's that. So it's like we're doing very high level science. We're pushing the body of knowledge forward. Not everyone in the room actually knows where we are and how far we've come with this area of inquiry. So let's talk to the people in the room who do know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what someone from academia might advise, right? What I've found is that if you walk into a room and only 3% of the people in the room know what you're saying, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to communicate. Just it would be like people in the room have foreign languages. It's going to be difficult to walk out of the room and be on the same page. It's just a failure of communication.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have found really helps is to I won't say play dumb, but to truly acknowledge your own lack of vocabulary for someone else's area. And so have you ever tried to speak a new language, or have you ever been in a new country with a different language that you don't know, and you kind of have to like basically go back to a child level and you learn how to ask, like, how do you say certain words? And so what I found really works is being in a room with a coach who knows a lot about their sport, and I don't know anything about their sport. It happens all the time. And I'll just say, hey, like, I don't really know the language you use, so what do you call this and what do you call that? And then they explain it, and then I attempt to articulate my views and ideas then through this language that they're teaching me so that I can
Mm-hmm.
communicate better.
Yeah. And you're
And
developing trust. That's the thing I think is what you're doing there. And that's my own summary of what everything we just talked about. It really is about trust when you're working with people.
and also if there is ego, like you said, oh, this person's really smart, they're gonna make me look bad. Well, I'm sitting there going like, can you teach me like the most basic fundamentals and the most basic like kindergarten level words from your sport that everyone in your sport, including athletes and anyone who's done your sport or coaches your sport, knows that I don't know. So now it's like, okay, this individual actually doesn't know everything, or they're not really smart, but I could see they're intelligent and have something to offer, and
Yeah.
we can have a conversation now.
I can tell you I've made that mistake, honestly. I mean, here I am preaching it, but sometimes when you get into a new situation with new people, you feel like you got to flex because you don't have credibility. But if you flex and you overflex, blows up in your face. So I guess the whole lesson is to make this whole thing work to satisfy Pat, who's our pro athlete, who's just doesn't feel like there's an infrastructure behind him to do this. We've got to develop better how we work together, and that's a lot of the secret right there. I don't know, Pat. Are we going there? I mean,
You know,
what?
Brett, yeah, and so I'm thinking about your position right now. So you're the vice president for the Sports Medicine Institute with the healthcare system, and through our partnership, we're collaborating. So I don't want to put you on the spot and ask you about what you think about ICE, as far as like the modality reduce swelling. So
No, good, because I thought you were talking about immigration. I thought
no,
we were
no, I'm not
separating.
there. And I don't want to ask you about what you think about taping ankles. I don't want to ask you about that. But what I do want to ask you is I've learned so much from you, and a lot of the way I look at athletes and maybe issues that they're having, even people, is looking at SI joint dysfunction. And you've shown me different techniques. And when I went down to Arkansas State, I took a lot of that, what you showed me. It was my last year of coaching as a head strength and conditioning coach. And I had the trust of Ron Carroll, who was the athletic trainer there for 42 plus years. And I just come in and share with him, hey, these are the things I'm knowledgeable of. Here's how I can help. And when I share with him the things that you taught me, because I I understood strength and conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
I mastered strength and conditioning, but that gap between strength and conditioning and sports medicine is where you really helped me to build up my knowledge base and skill set. And he was good with me getting hands on, using different techniques that you had taught me and implementing these things into the program. So just I want you to get really granular and talk about SI joint dysfunction, how it relates to potential hamstring issues, other issues up the chain, and take it from there.
Gosh, well, let me back up because you kind of set me up pretty good about, well, don't talk about philosophies, this, and this, and that. I do want to talk about my years. I mean, it's filling in again, the gray on the face. I've been doing this 30 years, had my hands on people since 1994. And, God, sorry, the gravity of that time just kicked in. What we thought was evidence-based when I came out of school in 94, I look back on now and I am embarrassed about. I can say 30 years later that what I knew then that I thought was just dogma, fact, whatever, is a joke. And I almost want to apologize to half the patients I treated back then. I got to think where we are now. All right. That 30 years from now, God willing, I'm still around. I'm looking at what we're doing now and going, I can't believe we thought like that. And I think it's that level of humility that has helped me continue to grow and really work with people outside my profession, like yourself, Pat, and strength conditioning, athletic trainers, and try to grow together what we know from a knowledge set and what we do from a treatment standpoint. So when you ask me to get real granular about the biomechanical nature of things, it's like, whatever I'm going to say now is going to come back in 30 years and they say, look at the old sage, you didn't know what he was talking about. That being said, I got you. When we look at DARI and we see what joint restrictions are going there, and granted, these are in active motions, right? It's not like something that's completely, scripted and laid out. I mean, the movements are, but we don't we try not to teach the athlete more than one frame of what they're doing. So we get the real them, and then once they get through it, you're seeing what they're doing in a functional status that makes you go, oh, okay. Why are they complaining of X, Y, Z? DARI gives you the what, all right, but it doesn't give you the why. Ernie's illustration, which is as close to DARI as you can get on a sticky note, which I thought was impressive, Dr. Rimer. You could see he mapped out, subtalar dysfunction there. Something was restricted. It wasn't moving. And any one of us can kind of go, all right, he can't dorsiflex as he's squatting down. So what's happening there? Boom, he gets a hard stop. Well, then that moves up the chain and all of a sudden the knee motion has to be excessive, but even it only has so much motion it's going to get in deflection, extension. So what's it going to do? It's going to either make up with that for some inner torque, maybe some outer torque. And then it keeps going up the chain. Well, that's it reached its end because of that restriction into subtalar. So then you get up into the acetabulum of the hip. And then, all right, where's it going to take up what's lost? And then if it gets into a stuck point where it's showing up red on DARI, you're like, all right, well, which is it now? Did the subtalar joint affect the hip issue, or did it go up to the next joint that isn't really what you'd call a joint? It's a syndesmotic little flexi joint called the sacroiliac joint, which, funny, when I got out of school in 94, I had docs arguing, why are you looking at SI joints? They don't move. I go, well, by definition, it's a joint, hence it does move. It may not hinge, it may not ball and socket, but it moves, it flexes, it translates. And we see over time just how a shift and how that joint is articulating. I love to take SI joints and illustrate them like my knuckles coming together, right? Because if you look on a good model of it, it kind of looks like that. It's a simplification. But if a joint looks like this and it's just flexing, what is going to keep it from going like that? Whoa, that's a small translation and a small misunion. And it may even result in something as simple as a leg length discrepancy, which drives me nuck and fucks.
Go for it, Brett. Go for the leg length discrepancy.
Okay.
Get on that box. Go for it.
Yeah, I got that on the ACS or last, and SCA last week. I can't tell you how many clinicians drive me absolutely crazy by putting heel frickin' lifts in shoes, trying to correct that leg length discrepancy. You know how rare a true leg length discrepancy is? Unless you've been in a traumatic automobile accident or had some weird growth thing that was seen when you were little, it just doesn't happen. Matter of fact, we're really close to being perfect when that comes down to it. It's usually a joint malalignment or restriction somewhere. Put that lift in there, you just might as well say, we've given up. We're not going to fix it. We're just going to make that, even out. Hey, you look even better on the DARI. Well, actually, they don't. They look even worse, because then it appears to be even, but the joint restrictions haven't changed. And so there's still a problem. And quite frankly, most of these people end up hurting worse, But that's what I'm talking about. You've got to look at this entire kinematic chain. I can keep going up the spine, but we only got 10 minutes left. But when you start looking at these things, you've got to be just good enough to be able to say, all right, what are the whys here, that are causing this restriction? Now, sometimes a joint restriction is just a joint restriction because it's got trauma, you name it, that type of thing. But until you tease out every structural anomaly that might be problematic, you're going to miss something, and you're going to affect performance that way. And you might even affect an injury. And so some of that is just sage talking. We could get into real, get out the joint structure and function book and start going through that type of stuff. But, from the graybeard standpoint, it's what we've all witnessed. I'm fortunate. I have a team of some guys that think the way I do, John Holland being one of them here at Louisville, who's been in the U of L healthcare system for decades. And we have the opportunity to teach our clinicians, but not just our clinicians. We have the opportunity to teach our strength coaches, teach our sports scientists, teach our athletic trainers to see what we see. And they come back to us, and then we all start seeing things very similar. It's not just a language we develop that's equal, it's a vision. And I don't know. I think that's what's still making this rewarding for me, because I really don't want the administrative hat on me. I really want the clinician hat on me. But I'd rather be teaching now than putting my hands on. Things are getting old and broken. I can't do this stuff as much as I used to. So it's time to pass the torch. I know I'm supposed to follow up with a question for all of y'all, but that was a good conclusive type of statement. Pat, fill me in there. Ted, jump on in. What you got?
Well, I think, how this discussion's been going, from my experience, that the dialogue between the strength coach and the athlete is crucial in terms of bringing this all together. So if you have an athlete who may not be injured, but has issues, when they come in and say, listen, I talked to Brett, this is how we're going to modify your workout. and there's right away, they know there's been collaboration, communication on their specific needs, and that ties everything in. And in some situations, just due to, say, proximity, there's some teams where your office is almost glass walled with the strength coaches, and they see there's actually ongoing dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Visually, that improves the trust of the athlete and the buy-in.
Yeah. I am glad you said that. That's the trigger I needed right there, because we don't, I don't think overall have that level of communication with our athletes that we should have. You know what I mean? Really being descriptive on what's going on. And I love that you said that the athletes, oh, well, Brett and I were talking, and we don't communicate awesome there either. You know, I think because of some of the things I might have touched on from an ego standpoint, you know, there's sometimes if you're not carefully communicating, which sucks that we have to be because we're in this for the athlete, but I digress again. If you're not carefully communicating and a wall goes up, then when that same athlete goes to the athletic trainer, I've been working with Brett and he said this, athletic trainer says, yeah, Brett doesn't know what he's talking about. Or, you know, we're not going to look at that. We're going to look at this. And boom, who gets affected the worst? Not only the athlete with what they don't get, but the athlete's confidence in the team just got shredded, you know, and that means we all failed. So I'd like to step it back a lot more. I think we need to spend more time listening to what the athletes are seeing, what's going on. But then we got to be willing to communicate and share information and not let our egos get in front of it. That's I think it's easier for us older guys, you know, I'm not going to say Ted's old, I'm not going to say Pat's older. I think those of us that are advancedly mature, let's put it that, that's a better word than old.
Aging adults is now the politically correct
there it is.
terminology.
Boom. That's
I like
it.
seasoned.
Seasoned, although it does sound like a rack of ribs when you put it that way, but that's cool too. You know, I think we've been able to kind of put our egos aside, mostly because for the fact that we just don't give a snap anymore. You know, we see the world differently. I think that was a revelation I had maybe, honestly, Pat, 15 years ago when we started really doing things. I started going, man, it's like I can sure take care of a lot more athletes if I share what I know and I teach others to be part of what I know and what I can do than just trying to do it all myself and being the man. You know, that's counterproductive to what we're trying to do. And the older I've gotten, the more reward I've gotten out of teaching others what we do, as opposed to, you know, stepping in and showing off, you know, which in some cases, that's what a lot of us are programmed to do when you're trying to get ahead or be seen in an advancing light that'll get you to the next level of your career. It's almost it's a real conflict. Honestly, I can see that psychologically. But again, once you get old enough and you've developed the respect of others around you, that's when it's your time to put down the podium and sharing and developing others. You're going to see more out of your career big time. Trust me on that one.
Brett, I think we've got time maybe for one more question. When it comes to return to play protocol, the importance I've seen in including the athlete in the conversation is critical. And from my experience, a lot of times that's not the case. The athlete is left out. I have seen through these corrective biomechanic interventions and education. So when you're working on an athlete, the one thing we were adamant about is educate the athlete on what you're doing.
Yes.
And we got some pretty good examples we don't have time to go into, but when that education came back and surpassed our expectations, because the athlete is living with their body 24/7. And educate them. They're not just an athlete when they're there in the facility or on the field. They're an athlete when they wake up, when they're sleeping, when they go to class or they're sitting in meetings, they're still an athlete. When they walk up and down the steps, they're still an athlete. And if they can be educated on what's happening with their body and the state that it's in and where it should be, magic happens.
Oh, sure does.
And yeah, I'll stop there.
No. And I know there's not really a question there as a statement of fact. I think that is it, you know. I love tools like DARI and everything. I mean, DARI is great because it gives us a baseline of what we know normal is. So when they do get injured and it's time to make a return to play, you know, decision, you can put the athlete in it and show them their data. And so, what do you think? You know, it looks to me like this still isn't firing right, this and that. And they go, oh, yeah, you know, maybe I need to work more on that, this and that. But again, it's like, I don't know why we don't. I don't know why I don't know if it's an aura of we don't really trust their own judgment because they think they're going to push themselves back sooner than they should. I'm not know if I'm buying that anymore. And there was a time then that was the case. I think just based on the whole information age and what these athletes are learning, I think they know how to, in essence, protect themselves and be on top of what their body's telling them. And so we should trust it a lot more. You know, there's still, I mean, there's so many times I've cleared an athlete to play, but I knew that if anything, the injury was above the neck, if you know what I'm saying. There was things up here that were more a barrier to them totally returning to participation than what was going on biomechanically. And if we don't address that, which fortunately at Louisville we are, you know, you're going to miss so much. And so it's got to start with communication and understanding and education. And well, I believe we're going to get there. I think we are rolling up on it.
I just want to throw one thing out there before Ted asks his last question, if I can. So back to science. Sometimes we often think that if the clinical practice isn't supported by scientific research, then it's invalid. But we also know there's a long history of people out there doing things, and then the science follows the practice to verify and validate what's happening in the field. And so here we are talking about our experiences, and a big theme of this conversation today is communication between staff and athletes and gaining buy-in and stuff. And so, of course, we're going to share our experiences, and I'm going to turn to the peer-reviewed literature. And lo and behold, I'm just going to give this to you really, really quick. So I come across a 2022 paper by Martin, Green, and colleagues. It's called Healthcare Teams, Terminology Confusion and Ramifications. And there's a concept it's called conceptual confusion. It says the conceptual confusion surrounding healthcare team terminology is due to inconsistent definitions, misuse of terms, and interchangeable use of similar terms. They carry on and say that this conceptual confusion in language is also a barrier to the translation of knowledge into clinical practice. And so they state that conceptual confusion or inconsistent use of language between stakeholders can lead to misunderstandings, reluctance to collaborate, disagreements, and unsuccessful clinical research translation and implementation. So
You see, hang on, man. That's why I can't do this job without you anymore, Ernie, because you always come in and drop mics like that. You just summed the entire discussion in literature. That I'm telling you, this guy's a wild man at a party. You got to bring him in, you know, drop things. And that's what makes, I think, what we're doing at Louisville so fun, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks. So in this example, one case where while we have had those experiences, there is also peer-reviewed evidence to support what we described over the past hour.
Yep.
All right, Brett, we're going to finish up here.
Okay.
Some book recommendations for our listeners. And this could be related to, you know, you as a sports medicine professional, or you just as a professional person.
Yes, book recommendations. You know, I'm be straight up. I'm not the biggest reader, but I am a good listener. And hang on a second. For some reason my screen just went dark. But I am really enjoying. I'm actually looking at my library right now. I like to look at a lot of leadership periodicals and stuff, because that's really what I have to get better at, you know, is that. So the one that I'm into right now is called the Let Them Theory. That's a good one, worth checking out. It's really when you're working with a lot of people and you're running into barriers on where their thought processes are and where they want to go. You simply let them. A lot of times that's the only way they'll learn a lot of their lessons. I'm reading this other one, which is called The Courage to Be Disliked. You know, unfortunately, we run into that a lot in leadership. But I'm also geeking out a little bit on AI. So I've got this one called Super Agency that I'm keeping an eye on, worth looking at. Went to a leadership conference and saw that. So there's 3 good ones. I think I got another one coming up here pretty soon. I can't remember the title of it because just had a keynote last week in one of our leadership conferences on it. But yeah, you know, I think I've read so dang much biomechanical stuff. Not that I've ever got it fully figured out, but man, it's hard to stay on top of newer and newer generations that you find yourself being over, whether it's from a boss standpoint or the athletes we work with. A lot of the new leadership literature is geared toward trying to understand that better. And every year I get older, the harder it is for me to relate. Always tried to stay on top of that, Ted, but man, it's like, whew, you know, the more I know, the less I understand. So
Yeah.
there it is. Oh, which I can't even see that.
Surrender to Lead, Brett. That's what you sent it.
That's it. Surrender to Lead.
By Jessica Kriegel and Joe Terry.
Yes, yes, yes. I like what's going on there. So there it is. There it is. Look at all these leadership stuff. I'm not geeking out like I used to. I'm in a different headspace.
Good stuff. Well, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure, guys.
I'll have you back on again. And if you can think of anyone else you think would make a great guest on this podcast, you know, pass it along to us. And anyone out there that's listening or watching this, if you have someone that you would like to see on this podcast, please reach out to us. Appreciate you all. Y'all have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.